How's it going, everybody? This is the ESOP guy, and we are on a journey to an ESOP. I'm so glad you could join us today. If this is your first time joining our podcast, I wanted to describe this. This is a resource for those that are thinking about utilizing the benefits of an ESOP, whether that be in a transition for their business for an exit or some kind of succession planning process. Could even be utilized for strategic growth in different aspects of that. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about that because we're going to get into a kind of a different structure that I don't think a lot of companies have thought through or considered. So with that, the podcast has been going on for 3 seasons. And if you're interested in other episodes, please go to our website at journeytoanesop.com. And again, thank you so much for joining today. One of the things I like to do in the podcast is delve a little bit into different types of industries, because I think it's very helpful, because sometimes companies are thinking, well, what about my type of business? And today we're going to do that specifically for veterinarian practices and look at the possibilities of again, a different type of structure using some of the components of an ESOP. It's really important to understand there's a lot of ways to do these things. And as we expose you to this, I think it's really partly there to help you understand new ideas and different things. But this is always going to come back to asking good questions to your advisors, and whether that be your CPA or your attorney or whoever else is helping you. So to really get into this today, though, we're gonna interview Emmitt Nantz, and Emmitt Nantz is the Chief Operating Officer with a company called Galaxy Vets. And Emmitt has really been a big part of Galaxy Vets in their growth strategy and how they're putting this new structure together. They are more of a startup, but what Emmitt and I are going to do is kind of go into how they've structured their company and what actually is happening in terms of making this an opportunity for other veterinary practices that want to join in terms of how they're going about it. And again, using a very unique kind of structure. So with all that, Emmitt, thank you so much for joining today. Welcome to our podcast.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate being here.
Great. So as we start out, it's probably really helpful for everybody just to get to know you a little bit. Can you give us a little bit, just from your perspective, your background, maybe with the company and in relationship to maybe your skill set and what you kind of bring to the equation?
Sure. Yeah, I've been within the veterinary space for about 20 years, so it's been my career, and I've managed hospitals and a bunch of stuff in between, from software to regional management and then company management as well. So I've really grown throughout different phases of this career in this industry, and have a passion for the people who are passionate about pets. That's really how I sum that up. Most of my background is in process improvement. And so I go into functional operational improvements to gain capacity or improved scalability within an organization. And I did that for some larger organizations like Banfield. I spent a number of times there, their largest veterinary group within the US. I also worked for a few years at IDEX, which is a provider of software and diagnostics within the veterinary space. My main purpose at Galaxy Vets as a COO is to bring a lot of that experience and consolidate veterinary clinics to be able to leverage economies of scale and also improve their EBITDA performance. So the veterinary industry for quite a few years now has really been gaining a lot of momentum. It's gone through a couple of recessions. It's done very well. So there's a lot of private equity coming into the space to consolidate. A few years ago, you could have purchased a veterinary hospital for somewhere between 5 and 8 times their EBITDA. They're running 15 to 20 times their EBITDA for a single practice now. Wow. And groups, consolidated groups are the most recent one, actually went for 26 times consolidated EBITDA. So a lot of upside potential, very attractive to private equity. But what we've found is the professionals are usually getting a little bit left behind, feeling pretty burnt out, and we see quite an opportunity there. So ESOP's been attractive to us to help close that gap. Yeah,
those are huge multiples. What makes up the difference for? You still have to, at the end of the day, you have to make that up in the deal structure at some point. If you bought it for 26, which seems just incredibly high, or even 15. Yeah. So how do they justify something that high?
Well, you get to gain quite a bit back after acquisition as you consolidate these together. So you can make up 5 to 8, maybe up to 10 times some of that over the course of 3 to 5 years. Just through the consolidation, you can start to outsource. A lot of these independent clinics take on a lot of the payroll and the management, those types of things, you can start to convert that into production. So you've got growth and cost that's consolidated. So you start to make up quite a bit of that fairly soon. But then in the industry, what we've got is a lot of upside potential. We've seen accelerated growth in pet ownership, as well as what we call the human animal bond. So people paying attention and spending money on their pets. So you start to make up some of that.
Yeah, I don't know if you have them off the top of your head, but I would imagine just just intuitively that everybody has a pet now. It seems like everybody's got a dog or a cat. So the numbers is that real? And is there any statistics around like how many more pets people have or the amount of money they spend on pets?
Yeah, COVID was quite an accelerant to pet ownership, but not only an accelerant to pet ownership, but I don't have the numbers in front of me as far as how many more pets grew. We do have some of that on call. But what we have also recognized in addition to pet ownership, just one of the things to note there is early in COVID, a lot of the shelters ran out of pets. A lot of people adopted, so a lot of acceleration there. But the other accelerant there is just attention to pets, because so many people actually end up working from home.
Yeah,
they're with their pets. They recognize symptoms and stuff far more than they used to. And that's actually increased some of the demand. But one of the big opportunities we're recognizing is COVID created increased demand, but the offset of that, the supply, this is a service industry, we're getting some of this burnout, and that's creating more and more of a gap between supply and demand. A lot of what we're going to talk about within the ESOP today, and a lot of what Galaxy Vets is doing, is really about attracting that supply of service back into the organization to meet that demand.
Okay. Yeah. So kind of identifying the gap and then coming in with a solution. So I think a good place to start for us too is to help us to better understand the structure, the ownership structure of Galaxy Vet. So can you go through that a little bit? I know, like, as I alluded to at the beginning, you're a startup company, but can we explain that a bit?
Yeah. So as I've already started to talk to a little bit, burnout is a big driver of decreased supply of professional services. We need to be able to pull that back in. Not that long ago, the strategy for veterinarians was to participate in a practice and then buy them out. And that was their opportunity. Well, with these multiples we just talked about, that becomes less of an ability for individual buyers. Plus, veterinarians are coming out with much higher student debt than they used to have as well. So that also makes it less available for them to buy into these practices. We recognize that, as well as this consolidation tends to be putting a lot more demand on the entire staff. A few people make a lot of money with the multiples we talked about. Staff is kind of left behind in ruins in some instances. So we recognize that as the opportunity. We are a startup with a lot of background and experience in the management team, but we wanted to come into this with fixing that. A couple other things to note: veterinarians have a 3 to 4 times higher suicide rate than the general population. It's twice as high as medical profession in general. 44% of the professionals in this space are actually considering leaving the profession because it's too difficult. So again, we're looking at those as opportunities to close that gap between supply and demand. That brought us to the ESOP conversation. What we actually set out to achieve is say, how can we create ownership for people who traditionally had ownership opportunities and no longer do? And how can we attract them to build their own wealth? So contribute to their own financial success, and everybody wins versus a few people win. That was kind of our thesis going into this. Sure. So as we started to explore, we were introduced to ESOP. And we said, that sounds like it's really going to help us out. Because when we were exploring sharing ownership, there's a lot of burden associated with tax obligations as it's granted. The ESOP helps us say, look, we're just going to give you some ownership, and we're going to drive all of our performance and our metrics towards performing, EBITDA contributions and that growth. But we're all going to be on the same page, but you don't have to worry about this tax obligation. And then as we started to learn more and more, the ESOP got really, really attractive to us, just from, again, continuing to move towards that mission of bringing veterinary medicine back to veterinarians is how we surmise that. Sure. So the structure of our organization is we have seed investment, private equity investment. It's minority ownership with a focus on ESOP becoming a majority. We also have rollover equity. So as we acquire these hospitals, we acquire them 100%, but we pay in cash and we roll over in equity with the organization. So we end up with, eventually in about 5 years, we're shooting for at least 70 to 75% ownership is within the organization versus outside equity.
So right now, on the ESOP, what percentage does the ESOP own and what percentage does the other minority owners own?
Yeah, actually, we are very startup. So we're just at the point of acquiring our first locations in our hospitals. So we're standing this up from the beginning. And actually, it's a KSOP.
Yeah.
So it's a 401k combined with an ESOP, because an eventual exit option is IPO. And so those both qualified plans allow us transferability between the two.
Mhm.
So right now, the ESOP is being structured and stood up with the intent of first issuance. We'll be granting those shares in Q1 of 2023 for those that have been in the company through the end of the year.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, and I'll just interpret what you said for people that are listening. You created the ESOP plan document, and you've set it up to where you can basically grant shares into this. And the KSOP situation, which is very unusual, we did a podcast on that before, but it's where you combine both the 401k plan and the ESOP plan. They're both retirement plans. And then that's a combined retirement contribution or a retirement plan that people can take advantage of. So they can put money in the 401k. They can have it as part of the ESOP. And so your strategy is, then I'm just going to bring you in as a new company, as part of our consolidated venture. And then the benefit would be, part benefit, because I know there's other benefits, would be we're going to grant you shares in this ESOP that we've created. And then over time, that ESOP is going to grow in terms of number of shares and participants, and of course, value is what I'm guessing.
Absolutely. And our primary communication around this is that we're all shared owners in this. So whereas some of our competitors might whip the horse, for lack of a better term, to get the production and the improvements through, we're going to have much more of aligned communication on if we do these things, we're going to see these benefits, and we all get to win from those improvements.
So when you say kind of startup, how many practices are starting off with you guys?
Yeah, so we're just a few months into the setup of the structure. We have a management team that's very experienced. We've got a strong ESOP and a 401k background. We have a strong CFO, CEO, COO, management of people and culture. We have actually a lot of the ESOP and some of the other things that we're doing. We've attracted 350 hospitals, and we call inbound leads. So where most of our competitors are doing cold call outbound lead generation, we have 350 practices that have reached out to us saying, hey, how can we join you?
Really?
So we're working those through the pipeline. Another component of this too is we have, in this space, I've already talked about burnout, and 44% of professionals are considering leaving. So most of our competition in consolidation space, they have a veterinarian space open for 10 to 12 months. They spend $40,000 to $50,000 minimum to try to acquire. We have over 1,100 potential employees who have signed up wanting to join us. So we've also closed that gap and have attracted a lot, and ESOP has been a big component of that. So we're going through the first deals of bringing the first acquisitions into the organization. We have a pipeline of 350 more to analyze and bring in as well. So growth potential is certainly high. We wanted to structure this up front to get the results I just talked about as far as attraction.
So kind of doing some acquisitions that I've done in the past, I mean, there's a lot of work that has to be done to acquire them and integrate and get everything implemented. How have you set it up to where is it streamlined, or is it because every practice is probably unique, all right, because you have different owners of these practices that are now looking at this as a possibility.
Yeah, we focus very diligently on process design and process improvement, continuous process improvement. So we leverage Kanban pretty diligently as well. So we set up that process. We measure how much time each is spending in each phase. So we have what we call an upstream and a downstream approach. Upstream being before acquisition, downstream post acquisition. And so we manage them through the point of marketing to sales qualified lead to proposals and letter of intent, and through due diligence and actual close. So we bring them through each of those, and we do it with what we call WIP limits, and manage how much we have in each, so we have predictable flow through and improvement opportunity. Then we continuously improve. So we look for the bottlenecks and the barriers in that process and flex to improve those.
How many do you think you could do in 2022?
Yeah, our target is to be specific about what we bring in 2022 to establish those processes and accelerate in 2023 and beyond. So we're targeting somewhere between 10 and 15, depending on the size of the deals that we bring through, 10 to 15 locations in 2022. Again, define those, refine those processes, and then accelerate. Our goal is in 5 years, we'll have 220 locations. And one of the cool things about Galaxy Vets is we're building what we call a hub and spoke design. In Galaxy Vets, we call it a solar system. So it's where you have a centralized STAR, which is a specialty emergency surgical center. And we have what we call planets. And these are the acquired locations that are general practice. And we have internal referral type of capacity there, which will also accelerate economies of scale growth to the EBITDA line. Mm-hmm. So we have that strategy. We're going to work through a lot of our thesis in the first year to make sure that it's solid before we accelerate.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, it's very unique, very interesting. So when you approach, I mean, you got 350 in your pipeline, so it sounds like people are starting to get to know who you are. What I know the ESOP's attractive, and there's a lot of benefits to them. And I know that you kind of addressed the burnout rate, which sounds pretty, it's pretty high. I mean, compared to other industries. So what's really attracting companies to this model mostly? Is it the financial benefits? Just wanting, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, we've done some surveys of the potential bench strength out there, and to understand what are some of those drivers. And the top three, number 3 is actually compensation. So it's not really about compensation, although a lot of competitors in this space offering significant sign-on bonuses and contracts for production and kind of some immediate wealth associated with that. But the first and the second is really about work-life balance, and then the culture within the organization that they're working for. They've identified, the veterinarians specifically have identified they need more balance. What we know in this space is that it's about 80% female, and that's shifted over a period of time. And so we're seeing certain things pop up of required needs to be able to balance life and work and not be a 40 to 60 hour a week commitment to what they do as a profession. So we're flexing some options in addition to the ESOP and having ownership and participating there, but we want to be able to say, look, we can provide benefits at lower rates. So how many days can we commit there? We also know that burnout is a matter of, if you think about a veterinarian, they went to school for many years to get a degree that's very specific to providing this service.
Right.
And they drive for that goal, but most days in a general practice veterinary hospital is fairly redundant. Mm-hmm. So they go from really pursuing a goal for a long time to kind of a monotonous, redundant type of engagement. So something else we're standing up is we're going to be leveraging telemedicine very strategically in this organization. Others tend to bolt it onto their operations. It's central to what we do. We also have some other services to where we can offer some variety to the daily work. So you can work in a GP, you can work in a central location, you can work telemedically, mix some of those up, and also flex the hours. Mm-hmm. What we know from a supply demand piece is as long as we can attract enough talent back in, we can have that flexibility to still meet operational needs. So that's what we're going for, and that's attractive to quite a few folks.
How many hours does a vet work on a normal basis, just on a given week, if they have their own practice?
If they have their own practice, they're generally working 60 to 70 plus. So they work full-time, 100%. And the value of their retirement essentially is locked into the asset there. So right now the seller has quite a few options because those multiples are high, a lot of interest. But the other veterinarians in that space are also working 40 to 60 hours a week. And most of them are on what are called pro-sal, so production on top of salary. And so it's based on the production they create. Another unique component of Galaxy Vets is we're offering straight salary. So we're going to offer them a salary based on the production that we've seen before, but lock that in instead of, because that's going to improve some of the flexibility within our network concept to be able to refer and provide good care versus focus on the transactional components. And we're offsetting that with a few other things like membership services and whatnot.
Yeah. And so instead of them having a compensation that's based on how much I bill out every week, you're going to give them a base salary, right? So it makes it a little simpler.
Base salary. And a base salary is going to make it, it's easier for them because they know they got a guaranteed kind of income that they can bank on, but it's going to significantly improve the collaboration between professionals to provide care for the pet and make sure that they get what they need.
Sure. Well, so as I listen to you talk about this, one thing that kind of comes to me is like with ESOPs, and what we talk about a lot on the podcast,
Yep.
a lot of what we do is aimed at helping to provide an exit. And so
Yep.
is yours kind of really aimed at helping people find, because it sounds like they're being set up to, in a good way, being set up to kind of transfer their practice into a larger group so they can kind of work more, balance out work-life balances but just be paid as much as they had before. Meanwhile, building a retirement account in the ESOP. Is that kind of the main goal?
Yeah, that's what we found when we started exploring ESOP, is that it's usually used to provide an exit for owners and sell to employees. So a lot of the partners that we engaged, from a trustee as well as other advisors, they're like, oh, this is a pretty cool concept. For us, it seemed like a natural fit to achieve what we're trying to achieve here by sharing ownership. So yeah, we want to take, in the beginning of this conversation, we talked about the significant value that can be created with these multiples within the space. We wanted to reinvest that back into the team and have them create their own wealth. We're all participating in that, but we have a common cause.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that this gives us a very competitive advantage as we're consolidating. And we're looking for like-minded. There's over 22,000 practices individually owned still in the US.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for 220. There's only 1% of them. So we're looking for owners that aren't looking to exit right now. They're not saying, hey, I need to cash out and go live in the Bahamas. They want to continue to practice. A lot of them that have engaged us are committing to at least another 5 years or more in the profession, but they're really attracted to the idea of sharing ownership with their employees because they don't have that vehicle very well within their individual practice, but they recognize the value the entire team brings to their success. So this is actually proving to be very attractive to a subset that we want to partner with.
Yeah. Okay. So that helps a lot. So the getting kind of a target of 220 practices, and what you're saying is by doing the roll up, I mean, they could take their multiple and it could go to 26, right? And so
right.
The value proposition for that is much better than on their own, which
that's true.
Yeah, and this is something that came up, and I've done a couple podcasts on this, and it's the idea of how do you use a roll-up scenario with an ESOP, and do you do you do the roll-up and then go ESOP, or do you do it kind of utilizing an ESOP? And I think that your model is pretty interesting, because we had this question in Seattle recently for the ESOP NCEO conference. I did a presentation, and this guy raised his hand and he said, how could I use a roll-up? How could I use the ESOP for the roll-up? And we kind of talked about all kinds of things, but I don't think we really nailed this down. This is a really, I think, an interesting way to go about it.
Well, the key components of how we're setting this up, when we roll over equity from the hospital owners, we're not rolling that part into the ESOP. So we have 5 different share types: as preferred and common. And as you're aware, the ESOP has to have the highest common share associated with it. So our ESOP is common A shares. All employees, US-based employees, participate in that structure. We have also common B, and we use the common B for rollover equity and foreign employee participation. And so the mix of all 5 types gets us there, but we're using the common B for the rollover equity and the common A for the ESOP.
When you bring them in, are you guys doing any kind of valuation on the practice? And
Absolutely.
If you are doing that, are you putting any money out on, or saying, hey, this is how much we'll give you? Or is it, because that's like a normal acquisition, or are you just saying, hey, this is what it's worth, this is the value of your common B shares, and so they're going to be holding on to those, and they're basically contributing those? Is that how it works?
Yeah, so we pay cash for part of the transaction, and we roll over equity for another portion of that transaction. So that's why we raise funds, outside capitals, or to pay the cash part of it. Okay. Early participants within this have significant upside potential, because if we're able to roll over part of their equity at a low share value, and then 5 years we're running 26 plus, there's discussions out there of even going up to 40 times EBITDA in certain exit opportunities for some groups that are out there considering it now.
Wow.
So that type of upside potential allows individual owners right now that want to stay in the game to participate in a much larger exit in the future, and take a mini exit now.
Well, yeah. I mean, those numbers are big. I mean,
Big.
yeah. So now you take your model, which I think we've done a good job of giving a good overview, and you compare it to the private equity roll-up model. How are you guys different, and how are you? I mean, you're a little similar in some sense, but how are you? How is that really different?
Yeah, how's it different from the equity full 100% participation?
Yeah, like a
I think
private
we've kind of
and says, hey, we'll pull these together. We'll give you here's your piece of money, and then we'll give you reinvest that money, and then then you can sell again later once we finish the big roll up.
Yeah, most of the private equity consolidators, they have a few owners, and so ownership is a majority owned by the private equity, and then top management has a minority stake. So most of what we see in those organizations is a top-down drive that's really focused on short-term EBITDA improvements.
Right.
What we were able to create here is by including everybody in ownership and putting private equity in a minority position, we're able to focus on long-term. So I tend to refer to Simon Sinek on this. We're really trying to build an infinite game design versus a finite 3 to 5 year exit. Mm-hmm. That's going to perpetuate and we think really influence the future of the industry. And we're getting a lot of momentum to that. Mm-hmm. So by putting private equity in a minority position, we're able to focus on the improvement of the hospitals and the EBITDA acceleration, which we have a lot of talent and experience within our organization to do. And that's going to align everybody. That's our primary thesis there is everyone in every location is committed to the same desired outcome. And we're not doing it for somebody else, we're doing it for ourselves. And then we all get to participate and win. What we're seeing is that gives us a competitive edge in the space that the veterinary industry is in right now to be able to attract talent and perpetuate growth.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, I mean, and I think if people really understand what's behind a private equity deal, I mean, I think what they're doing is they're primarily just targeting someone's exit plan. I mean, you want to get out, we're going to get you as much money as we can.
That's right.
In your case, you're targeting something a little different. You want the ongoing, 40-something-year-old person, maybe even in their 50s, that wants to work some more time and build more value, and they're really kind of maximize their exit as well. But for a 65, 75-year-old person who's got the vet practice, does your model make sense?
Yeah, we can accommodate those types of situations. They're not the ideal scenario for what we're trying to achieve because of that longevity and perpetuity. But mainly what we are looking at is that if that seller is a producer, because this is a service industry, and so they're a doctor and they're producing, we need to figure out how to offset that, because otherwise we acquire the asset and the value of that asset goes down immediately because we've lost that production. Mm-hmm. But in some instances, a lot of those owners are already out of the production component. They've moved fully into management, and we can start to offset some of that. We still look at a vesting period, so they're not going to get the full value. It's not vesting, but they're not going to get the full value day one. Mm-hmm. They still have to hold on to it for 5 years. But if they're outside of production, we can start to accommodate that type of design. They just have to hold.
Yeah. And part of that whole infinite game design, I mean, as things do ramp up, I mean, I would imagine, and this is true for every company that does anything, is that there's usually an ongoing need for, bringing up the next group of whoever it is. So in this case would be vets. Vet practitioners who probably traditionally come into a vet practice with the elder and then the apprentice and whatever, and then they end up being able to have the practice, which I've seen work pretty well. Are you guys going to have like this gap at some point, or do you have a plan for succession and bringing up new people?
Yeah, actually, I think the ESOP is a key contributor to helping us close that gap, because they have ownership, but they don't have full ownership, but they have collaborative ownership, not only within that location, but with other locations. So, something just kind of a side note, oftentimes you'll see 2 locations that are competitors across the street, for example, and they're competing for the customer base. They might both be acquired by the same company, but because they're still individual units held accountable to their own production and performance, they're still competing. Within this type of model, now they're collaborators. And so they can share services back and forth. And they can see that accelerant associated with that collaboration across the organization. So we know that we're able to pull them in, move in a common direction, and help just perpetuate the growth of the entire company. And we really think that is the opportunity to offer ownership, collaboration. A lot of this is generational too.
Mm-hmm.
So as we move into new generational veterinarians, that work-life balance is far more important than full ownership. But they still are attracted. That's the traditional way of veterinary medicine, is to end up owning a practice of your own. Mm-hmm. So we really think the ESOP, again, is closing that gap and giving them a bridge to ownership, but work-life balance. And I think it's going to help us get there. So just to the last part of your question there, if they're into that model and that collaborative design, then it's more about professional development. Mm. So they can increase their skill set, go from general practitioner to specialized surgeon, for example. Mm-hmm. And there may be more salary associated with that, but there's also more production into the model, which grows the business, which they share value with or share ownership in.
Yeah, I'm curious about something too, because it sounds like a lot of the administrative functions, the things that really are a headache, when you're in your business, it's like, I got to do my payroll. I have a sales tax audit, or I have this and that going on. They're kind of set free from a lot of that. Is that kind of how you're working?
That's true. And that's kind of going to be a most consolidation type of design. So if you could take independent business and roll them into a group, yeah, you can offload payroll, vendor management. You get buying power and pricing analysis. You get a lot of upside potential by consolidating some of those services, and vice versa. You're freeing up. Mm-hmm. Generally, the owner is a doctor, so you're freeing up capacity for production, which increases top line as well.
Yeah, I bought, in my firm, I bought other CPA practices, and that's one of the things they're like, look, I can now just focus on being a professional, doing what I do, and I don't have to go back and worry about this other stuff that kind of creeps in. So it's got to be a nice benefit, and as you guys do that, what is so you have, this is happening, I guess, all over the place. So 220 practices could be anywhere. What's your geographic coverage? And then how do you provide that level of administrative support when it's, all over the place?
Yeah, another unique consideration of Galaxy Vets is we don't have a central office, a home office. We are a distributed team. The CEO and I have worked remotely for over 5 years individually. We know how to stand up a business and do this. So that's giving us the flexibility to attract talent nationwide and actually international as well. We have Canadian and European employees as well to help stand this up, to take on some of those administrative costs or tasks. Mm-hmm. Our focus as far as acquisition is the US right now. There's future capacity to flex into Canada, Europe, Australia. But right now, focused on the US, and there's kind of a few different things we're looking at. There is this consolidated solar system I referred to before, where we can get a group of hospitals geographically, that we start to get economies of scale associated with that. But there's also quite a few hospitals throughout the country who are already fairly strong, and their EBITDA performance, they know how to manage it. We can, to the point you were making a minute ago, we can start to offload some of the burden associated with the back office responsibilities, increase their capacity for growth, and allow them to leverage buying power and some of the economies or efficiencies we know how to do operationally to improve them. So we call them asteroids in our model. So we intend that they'll still be a standalone location. They won't participate in all the economies of scale of the solar system, but we still bring some of those efficiencies to them, and they can see top line and bottom line improvements as part of the ecosystem.
Okay, so it kind of really depends on what they have going in, and what their needs are, where they fit in the solar system,
and what we see as their future potential for growth and improvements.
Right. So taking the camera and looking a little bit deeper on the employees. I know you guys are going to do in 2023, you'll do a grant. All of the employees are participating in the ESOP. Tell me a little bit more about like how, with ESOPs in terms of the employees getting those shares. Obviously they're going to be put in the retirement account. They're not paying for those shares because that's how ESOPs work. I guess my question is just, the questions that people always ask, like, how would this look from the employee's perspective? And how would you kind of explain it to the employees that are coming into this kind of program?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, Phil. We have some trial and error to go through. So introducing this and getting some feedback and improving on it, we continuous improvement, as we talked about earlier. But our intent of this conversation really is around first leveraging the knowledge associated with 401k. And that's somewhat disparate within this population that we're engaging. Some hospitals have a 401k. The teams already understand what the value is for future value creation or future wealth creation within a 401k and deferred tax compounding. So we'll start to leverage that and say the ESOP's just like that, except it's within the business that you're participating. So you have direct participation in the value of your ownership here. We also have conversation around, ESOPs are generally, I think, 4 to 5 times more valuable than a 401k from an individual level. Mm-hmm. Ours is actually going to be a little bit more than that from our anticipated design, because where most ESOPs are actually tied to a percentage of salary, so that over time, the value of the shares go up, you get less shares, and the upside potential is actually decreased because of that. Mm-hmm. We're actually granting shares, a solid set of shares based on level within the organization each year. So it's outside of the value of the shares and its actual quantity of shares that we'll grant by level within the organization. So we still meet the testing associated with even distribution and fair distribution of ownership. That's going to give us a way that we can help them grow. So the main point of our communication is we want to all share in the growth and the success of this organization. We're going to match the 401k and the ESOP together in a KSOP, so you have options to invest your own cash, defer your own salary to your future success. But you're also going to participate collaboratively with the rest of us to create wealth in combination with the ESOP. So putting those two things together and talking really about individual wealth creation in a collaborative environment is the key of our communication there.
Mm-hmm. No, I think and that's something that every company that transitions to an ESOP, they do want to make sure the message is correct. They want to. It's hard for people, and employees don't all get ESOPs. I mean, the truth is it takes a while for them to really understand it. So I was curious how that's going to go, and who you're talking to at the vet, who's in charge of these practices, they're going to have to explain it to their employees too. And so I'm sure that's going to be an important part of how you put it all together.
There absolutely is that, but we're encouraged by the response that we've gotten just by putting out in the marketplace. Mm-hmm. And that those 350 inbound leads that I talked about, the 1,100 employees that I talked about, part of that is in response to we're going to be an employee-owned company and a complete employee-owned company. Some others have shared ownership, but it's just for veterinarians or it's just for key staff.
Right. Right. Now that's
everybody in this organization is going to participate.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal. I think that's the whole spirit of ESOPs, really, when you get down to it, is sharing with everybody, depending on the contribution they're making into the company. Now, you had mentioned Canadian and European. Obviously, your company is going to be, it's a US ESOP. I know in other countries they have different forms of ESOPs. Are you going to set this up in Canada and in Europe too?
If we intend to expand hospital operations into those spaces, then we'll look for a more specific design that is similar to the ESOP and go there. Where we have a few independent employees, we're sharing foreign ownership through Common B, but we'll do it in the same format as the Common A, so it's apples to apples as far as growth potential in the ownership of those shares. So short term, it's granting shares as Common B, and then long term, if we go into those spaces, we'll look for a more sophisticated and aligned program.
Okay. That's very, like I said, very interesting. I learned a lot, and hopefully everybody else did. As we kind of close out, I kind of wanted to give you anything else that you wanted to mention about how you guys are structured, or the benefits that might be available to those that are interested in what you're doing.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Phil. Part of it's just to kind of reinforce what makes us unique within this space. So there is a lot of competition and there's a lot of cash. Mm-hmm. But there's quite a few people that own hospitals that don't want to exit. They're not just looking for a load of cash right now. They want to take care of their team. They want to continue to participate, and they're willing to let it ride for a little while because there's a lot of upside potential within this space. So we're really looking to bring in those like-minded participants that are going to help us grow and focus on our key objective is burnout prevention. There's no need to burn people out within this profession. Mm-hmm. We can balance supply and demand, enable people to do what they do. My primary motivation has been for a long time. I've done it many times, and one of the best results I got was when the doctor said, "Thank you for that improvement, because now I get to go home and have dinner with my family."
Sure.
That is what I'm trying to achieve, what we're all trying to achieve within this, and that's the people we want to participate within what we're doing here. So hope to replicate that.
No, I think that's a really good purpose behind it all. So I love what you guys are doing. It's really cool. So thank you so much for joining today, Emmitt. I really appreciate your time, and hopefully everybody else got a lot out of this, in terms of how you guys are structuring. And if you guys need help with this and specifically are interested, you can contact Galaxy Vets directly and get some more information on what they're doing.
Absolutely. Let us know. And thank you so much for having me on, Phil. Appreciate it.
Great. So for everybody else, thank you so much. And we will see you on the next step on this journey to an ESOP.